Howdy everyone, and welcome back to the CrappieEngineer YouTube channel. So, last video I talked more about the mental side of understanding money, and why knowing about compound interest can quietly mess with how you spend and your spending habits in general. So this video is more of the practical half of the same idea, and once you've decided to be intentional with your money, and you've actually got money to put somewhere, you may ask, in what order should it go? Well, the short answer to this is definitely not everything all at once, and there's an actual sequence that matters way more than which specific stock you decide to pick. So, without further ado, same disclaimer as always, I'm a college student, not a financial advisor. This is not financial advice, this is just what's been working for me. So, let's get right into it. Alright, so I didn't come up with this order myself, and I want to be upfront about that the same way I credit anyone whose idea I'm building on. The sequence is called the Financial Order of Operations, and it comes from the Money Guy Show. This is a channel run by real financial advisors, and I think it's the most sensible version of this idea I've come across. More useful than the usual internet financial advice. So credit where it's due, I'm walking through their framework, and then I'm going to tell you exactly where my own money follows it and where it doesn't. Alrighty, so the first couple steps of this aren't really about building wealth yet. They're mainly about not getting knocked backward by small stuff. And step one is just a small cushion, maybe a couple $100s, set aside so a flat tire or a small bill doesn't put you into personal debt. It's not investing money, it's basically just armor you keep in your checking account before you kind of walk into the fight of financial literacy. So, think about Squidward for a second. Half of his problems in the show come from something small and random going wrong. His house, his car, his clarinet. Every single time it happens, it wrecks his whole day. Because, maybe he doesn't have anything planned or set aside for this. A minor inconvenience turns into a full-blown crisis for him at times. And that couple $100 cushion is a fix for exactly that. The flat tire or the small bill, so that it doesn't ruin your week if you already planned for it. So for me, this one is basically already covered. My paycheck just goes toward my regular expenses, and since my emergency fund, which I'll get to in a second, already covers well over 6 months of what I spend, a separate tiny cushion on top of that would just be redundant for me. So, step 2 of this framework will be your employer retirement account match, like a 401k match, if you have one. This is basically free money, dollar for dollar, or 50 cents on the dollar, depending on your employer. And it's usually described as the closest thing to a guaranteed return that ever exists. So, say you're making $40,000 a year, and your employer matches 50% up to 6% of your pay. If you put in that $2,400 of your own money, and your employer hands you that extra $1,200 instantly before it's even invested a single day, no stock does that for you. You're not going to be getting a 50% return on your money anywhere else. And this one doesn't apply to me right now. My job is pure hourly income and I do not have benefits, though I will say the snacks and free food in the break room are doing some of that same job for me. Alrighty, so step 3 in this framework is going to be killing any high interest debt you may have. Credit cards, basically anything double digit interest before you invest another dollar anywhere else. And the math on this is pretty simple because you cannot reliably out-earn a 20% interest rate with any index fund returns. So paying that off is effectively a guaranteed return in the other direction. Say you're carrying $2,000 on a credit card at 22% interest. That's a guaranteed $400 plus a year working against you, no matter what the market does that year. Compare that to investing the same $2,000 and just hoping for a good year in the market. There's really no real contest here between this, and guaranteed loss beats uncertain gain almost every single time. So you get rid of the guaranteed loss first. This one's pretty easy for me to answer. I currently do not carry any debt right now, and my truck's paid off, and I pay my credit card in full every single month. So there's no interest compounding against me for me to worry about at the moment. Step 4 of this is going to be a real emergency fund, 3 to 6 months of expenses saved, sitting somewhere boring like a high yield savings account, not invested in the market. And this is a fund that basically covers you if your car needs a repair out of nowhere, or you lose your job for a stretch, or some other curveball that shows up that has nothing to do with the stock market at all. This one's not about returns either really, it's about never being forced to sell your actual investments during a bad month just to cover something like this. Mine actually covers well over 6 months of what I currently spend, since my expenses are still pretty low as a student. So steps 1 through 4 for me right now are basically already handled. So here's where this gets a bit more specific to me. I've talked before about my rule, 20% of every paycheck goes to investing, no exceptions really. And what I actually haven't told you yet is exactly where that 20% goes within this framework. And the answer is my Roth IRA. Every dollar of that 20% goes into an account that grows completely tax-free over the next few decades instead of a regular brokerage where I'd owe taxes on the gains eventually, and I mean pretty much completely tax-free. If you don't pay taxes on any of the gains in this account, including dividends, which is a pretty big deal once you're reinvesting those dividends every year for decades. The government does cap how much you're allowed to put into the Roth every year. Right now, it's $7,500 if you're under 50 and $8,600 if you're over 50 using the catch-up limit. So that cap does move over time, and it's worth double checking the current number yourself before you plan too far around it. But even hitting that cap every single year adds up really fast for you once you give it a few decades to compound. And given my current situation, that's about as close to a free lunch this entire framework kind of gets me. Alrighty, so one thing I really respect about the story that inspired this video is that the guy explaining this framework to me admitted that he does not follow the Money Guys framework perfectly either. He skips on maxing out his own 401k because he'd rather have the extra cash flow available for his personal business. And he states this plainly instead of pretending he's optimized every other dollar. So here's kind of where I deviate on this. The textbook order will tell you to fully max out your Roth IRA before you start putting real money into a regular taxable brokerage. And I definitely invest in a regular taxable brokerage alongside my Roth IRA as well. I've already got a significant amount of money sitting in a brokerage account, and I have it running alongside the Roth IRA instead of strictly after it. And I run that brokerage account the exact same way I've talked about before. I'm pretty boring with it on purpose. Most of it is in S&P 500 index or SPY, and a slice of it is in a dividend paying fund run by Schwab. It's called SCHD. And a smaller slice of this is split between REITs, and I have a bit of money in a midstream energy company, Energy Transfer. And I'm not really trying to pick stocks to beat the market. I'm just kind of picking some boring things to sit there and compound for me. Overall, I am a pretty passive investor with that money, and I mostly just let it sit and grow. But I am running two steps at once instead of one after the other. And maybe this isn't mathematically optimal, but it is the version that has been working for me and my personal goals at the moment. And that's really the point of admitting these deviations at all. The order matters more than perfection, and knowing the correct sequence and choosing to deviate from it on purpose to fit your personal goals is a completely different thing from not knowing the sequence existed for you in the first place. Alrighty, so there's one more piece of that is easy to forget once you're comfortable with all the investing pieces of this, and it's saving specifically for planned purchases that have nothing to do with growth at all. The framework calls this prepaying future expenses, and it's basically just cash set aside on purpose for something you already know is coming. So you're never tempted to sell your actual investments just to pay for a whimsical purchase. For me right now, that is a mini CNC router, is the same thing I mentioned back in my engineering projects video. A basic kit runs a couple $100, and building a serious one yourself costs quite a bit more than that. Either way, that money isn't invested for me right now, and it's not supposed to grow. It's just sitting there waiting to become a specific purchase in a few months whenever I'm actually ready to make it. Keeping that separate from my Roth and my brokerage means I'm never tempted to pull from either one just because today happens to be the day I decide I want the thing. So that's the actual Money Guys financial order of operations. You save a small cushion for one-off expenses that may sneak up on you. You invest your employer match, if you've got one, into your 401k. You kill your high interest and double-digit debt that is accruing double-digit interest. And you save a real emergency fund, which should be 3 to 6 months of your expenses. You invest into tax advantage accounts, and then after that you spend on everything else. And the biggest takeaway isn't any one step on this list, it's that the order itself is what most people never think about. They just save some here and there, invest some, throw some money at some debt, all at once with no real sequence, and they wonder why their financial progress feels slow. So once you know this order, the question stops being too complicated for you. Every time you get paid, you already know exactly where your next dollar is supposed to go. And that's it. That's the entire simple system. And if you follow this, maybe not to a T, but if you follow this loosely enough, you will become financially independent. Howdy guys, thank you for watching another CrappieEngineer production. Let me know down below in the comments what step of this you may be struggling with, or if you have this mastered completely. Also, let me know if this changed how you're thinking about your next paycheck at all. So, like and subscribe, and I'll talk to all of y'all soon.